A poor disabled boy sneaks into United HealthCare, desperate for help with his debilitating pain. When security tries to kick him out, the CEO steps in, offering more than just medical care. He offers a life-changing promise. Watch how one act of kindness turns this boy's world around. The morning sun had barely risen, casting a pale light over the city as Jamie trudged forward, his breath visible in the cold, crisp air. His thin jacket was no match for the biting chill, and every step sent a dull ache through his weakened leg. But Jamie couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything he'd endured to get here. Ahead of him loomed a building unlike any he had ever seen. The United HealthCare headquarters. Its towering glass facade shimmered in the morning light, reflecting a world Jamie felt he didn't belong to. A world of wealth, power, and people who rarely noticed kids like him. For Jamie, this wasn't just a building, it was hope. A desperate, fragile hope that someone inside might hear his plea. He didn't have an appointment. He didn't have insurance. What he did have was a tattered notebook tucked close to his chest, its dog-eared pages filled with dreams he dared to sketch late at night when the pain in his leg wouldn't let him sleep. The boy had walked for miles, limping and clutching that notebook, as if it contained all the answers. Inside were drawings of prosthetic legs, notes scribbled in the shaky handwriting of a child, and one phrase he had written over and over: "I just want to walk like everyone else." As he neared the grand entrance, his heart pounded. The revolving glass doors spun effortlessly, allowing polished professionals in suits and shiny shoes to pass through, their conversations lively and purposeful. Jamie hesitated. His shoes were worn, his clothes rumpled, and his face carried the exhaustion of someone far older than his years. Would anyone even listen to him? He tightened his grip on the notebook. "This is my only chance," he whispered to himself. "I have to try." Jamie stepped through the doors into a vast lobby filled with light and movement. The polished marble floors gleamed, and the hum of activity surrounded him. Voices echoing, footsteps clicking, phones ringing. It was a world so different from his own, and for a moment he felt impossibly small. But he couldn't turn back. Not when every step he had taken, every agonizing mile, had brought him here. Jamie took a deep breath and moved forward, scanning the sea of faces for someone who might stop and ask why he was there. Instead, a stern voice broke through the air like a whip. "Hey kid, what are you doing here?" Jamie froze. His grip on the notebook tightened as a uniformed security guard, broad-shouldered and towering, marched toward him. I need to see someone," Jamie stammered, his voice trembling. The guard frowned, his imposing presence only adding to the boy's unease. "This isn't a place for wandering kids. You don't belong here. Now turn around and leave." Jamie opened his mouth to explain, but hesitated. His throat felt dry, and his courage was slipping away. The guard stepped closer. "I said out!" Jamie instinctively stepped back, his hands trembling. In the process, his notebook slipped from his grasp and fell to the polished floor with a soft thud. Its pages fluttered open, revealing crude sketches of legs, drawings of medical equipment, and the words, "I just want to walk like everyone else." The guard leaned down, squinting at the pages, but before he could say or do anything else, a calm yet commanding voice sliced through the tension. "What's going on here?" Jamie turned slowly toward the voice, his heart pounding in his chest. The man who had spoken stood tall, his expression calm yet commanding. His suit was sharp but understated, and his kind eyes softened the intimidating air of authority around him. Jamie didn't know who he was, but the way he carried himself made it clear. This man was important. "What's going on here?" the man asked again, his voice even but firm as he approached. The guard straightened immediately, his demeanor shifting into professional defensiveness. "Sir, this boy wandered in off the street," he explained. "He doesn't belong here. I was just about to escort him out." The man's gaze flicked from the guard to Jamie, then down to the scattered pages of the boy's notebook on the marble floor. He crouched down, carefully picking up one of the pages. Jamie watched in frozen silence as the man studied the shaky sketches and the words scrawled in the corner. "I just want to walk like everyone else." The man straightened, holding the page in his hand. His expression had softened, but there was a spark of something else in his eyes now. Concern, curiosity, maybe even determination. He turned back to Jamie. "Is this your work?" he asked gently. Jamie swallowed hard, unsure if he should speak. The guard was still looming, and the boy wasn't sure if this man would help or simply send him away more politely. "Yes," Jamie finally whispered, his voice trembling. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Jamie," he said, his voice barely audible. "Jamie," the man repeated, almost as if testing the sound of it. He crouched down again, holding the notebook now with care. "Why did you come here?" I need help," Jamie stammered, his throat tightening. He glanced nervously at the guard, who stood with crossed arms, still skeptical. "I didn't know where else to go. Please, I'm not trying to cause trouble." The man nodded thoughtfully, his face unreadable for a moment. Then, without another word, he turned to the guard. His tone shifted, calm but commanding. "See that he's given a seat and some water," he said firmly. "I'll handle this personally." The guard hesitated, clearly unsure. "But, sir..." "That's not a request," the man interrupted, his tone sharp enough to leave no room for argument. The guard stepped back, his authority now overshadowed by the man's presence. He glanced at Jamie, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. Jamie stood frozen, unsure what had just happened. The man rose to his full height and offered Jamie the notebook. "Come with me," he said, his voice gentle now. "You're not mad?" Jamie asked cautiously. The man smiled faintly. "Mad? Number. But I am very interested in hearing your story." As they began to walk, Jamie finally found the courage to ask, "Who are you?" The man paused, turning to face him fully. "My name is Brian Thompson," he said. "I work here. Let's just say I might be able to help." Jamie didn't know the full weight of that name or the power this man wielded, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir in his chest, hope. And with Brian Thompson leading him deeper into the building, Jamie felt for the first time like someone truly cared. Jamie followed Brian Thompson down a quiet hallway, his heart racing with uncertainty. The bustling noise of the lobby faded behind them, replaced by the soft hum of distant conversations and the occasional beep of an elevator. Jamie clutched his notebook tightly, his fingers trembling. He had no idea what was about to happen. Brian led him into a large, sunlit office. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books and awards, and the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the city skyline. To Jamie, it looked like a world he didn't belong to, a world where everyone had everything they needed. "Have a seat," Brian said, gesturing to a chair near his desk. His voice was calm, without a trace of the harshness Jamie had heard from the guard. Jamie hesitated but eventually sank into the plush chair, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. Brian took the seat across from him, his expression kind but serious. "So, Jamie," Brian began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me why you came here today." Jamie hesitated, his throat tightening as the weight of his journey threatened to overwhelm him. I need help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My leg, it hurts all the time. It's hard to walk, and I can't run like other kids. I just want it to stop hurting." Brian nodded, his gaze steady. "And no one has been able to help you?" Jamie shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "We don't have any money. The clinics won't even look at us without it. My mom tried everything, but she works so much, and it's too much for her. I didn't tell her I was coming here. I thought maybe someone here could..." His voice cracked, and he quickly wiped at his eyes, ashamed of the tears. Brian's expression softened further, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes now, determination. "Jamie," he said gently, "you're incredibly brave for coming here. I can't imagine how hard that must have been." Jamie looked down at his lap, unsure what to say. "What's in your notebook?" Brian asked, gesturing to the worn book Jamie held so tightly. Jamie hesitated before slowly opening it. He flipped through the pages, revealing sketches of prosthetic legs, diagrams copied from library books, and his own crude designs for devices he imagined could help him walk. "I draw these when it hurts too much to sleep," Jamie admitted quietly. "I don't know if they're any good. I just want to walk like everyone else." Brian carefully took the notebook, studying the pages. The drawings were rough, but they told a story of determination, hope, and a young mind desperate for a solution. "Jamie," Brian said after a moment, "you have more courage and creativity than most people I've met, and you deserve to walk without pain." Jamie blinked, his eyes wide. You mean you're going to help me? Brian smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. Yes, we're going to help you. But this isn't just about fixing your leg. It's about making sure you can live the life you've dreamed of. Jamie's chest tightened with emotion. For so long, he had felt invisible, unheard. But now, for the first time, someone was not only listening, but promising to act. Brian reached for his phone and began dialing. I'm calling my medical team right now. We're going to bring in the best specialists, and I'll make sure they take care of everything, from your surgery to your recovery. Jamie stared at him, disbelief and hope battling within him. But it costs so much. You don't need to worry about that, Brian interrupted gently. That's my job. Your job is to focus on getting better. Tears spilled down Jamie's cheeks, and this time he didn't wipe them away. They weren't tears of pain or despair. They were tears of relief. In that moment, Jamie realized that he wasn't alone anymore. Someone had seen him, believed in him, and was willing to fight for him. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the rhythmic tapping of Brian Thompson's fingers on the desk. He was focused on the phone call he had just made, connecting with top medical specialists and organizing every detail of Jamie's care. But Jamie couldn't stop shaking. His eyes never left the man sitting across from him, the same man who had pulled him out of the cold, harsh grip of the security guard and brought him into this world he'd only seen from the outside. A world filled with opportunity and promise. A world he had never imagined he could be a part of. As Brian finished his call and set the phone down, he looked up at Jamie. His expression was both compassionate and thoughtful, as though he was taking in every word, every detail Jamie had just shared. Jamie, Brian began, his voice gentle, I know you've been through a lot. You've been struggling with your leg for a long time, but I need to understand everything, every detail. If we're going to help you, we need to know exactly what you're facing. Jamie hesitated for a moment. There was something about Brian's tone that made him feel safe, like this wasn't just a conversation for the sake of business, but a real chance for change. With a deep breath, Jamie began. I don't really remember how long it's been hurting. It's been a long time. Ever since I was younger, it's just gotten worse. He paused, his mind racing with memories, but they were jumbled and unclear. The pain was the only thing he could remember clearly. I can't remember the last time I felt normal, Jamie continued, his voice breaking slightly. My mom, she tries so hard to get me the help I need. She took me to every doctor, every clinic, but they wouldn't see me because we didn't have insurance. And every time we had to leave empty-handed, it felt like a punch in the stomach. Like we didn't matter. Brian's gaze never wavered, and he gave Jamie a moment to compose himself. You matter, Jamie, Brian said quietly. More than you know. Jamie wiped his eyes, trying to blink back the tears, but it was too hard. He felt vulnerable, exposed, and he hated it. But there was something in Brian's presence that made it feel okay to let go, to stop pretending everything was fine when it hadn't been. It hurts all the time, Jamie admitted, his voice barely a whisper now. It's like my leg is always aching, like it's never going to stop. I try to walk, but it feels like I'm carrying the weight of the world with every step. I want to run, I want to play soccer, just like the other kids, but I can't. I just want it to stop. Brian leaned back in his chair, his fingers clasped together thoughtfully. There was a deep sadness in his eyes, but it was matched by something else, an unwavering determination. I can't even imagine what you've been through, Jamie, Brian said, his voice soft but firm. But what I do know is that you're not alone anymore. We're going to help you get the treatment you need. We're going to make sure your pain ends. Jamie felt his heart flutter in his chest, a mix of disbelief and hope. He had spent years telling himself that he wasn't worth the trouble, that there was no way anyone could help him. But now, in this moment, he felt like something had shifted. It was a strange feeling, almost as if a weight was being lifted from his shoulders. But the costs, Jamie whispered, unable to keep the worry out of his voice. I don't know how we'd afford it. I don't want to be a burden. Brian smiled gently. You're not a burden, Jamie, and you won't have to worry about that. United HealthCare is here to make sure you get what you need. We'll take care of everything. For the first time in a long while, Jamie allowed himself to believe that this wasn't just another empty promise. This wasn't another clinic brushing him off. This was real. This was a chance to finally be heard, to finally get the care he so desperately needed. The CEO of United HealthCare wasn't just offering to help him with a medical problem, he was offering Jamie the one thing that had seemed impossible: a future where he could walk without pain, a future where he could dream again. "I know it's hard to believe right now," Brian said, his voice filled with understanding. "But I promise you, Jamie, this is the start of a new chapter, your chapter, and we'll be here with you every step of the way." Jamie looked at Brian, the weight of his words sinking in. A tear slipped down his cheek, but this time, it wasn't from pain. It was from something deeper: gratitude. The room seemed to stand still as Jamie sat in front of Brian, his hands tightly clutching his notebook. The hum of the building felt distant, almost as if the world outside had stopped in its tracks. For the first time, Jamie felt like he was truly being listened to, like his pain, his struggles, and his dreams mattered. Brian stood up, moving toward a large file cabinet in the corner of the office. He opened one of the drawers, pulling out a thick folder and flipping through it for a moment. His focus was intense, but there was a certain gentleness in his actions, like he understood the weight of every moment for Jamie. "Jamie," Brian said as he turned back around, "I've already spoken to my medical team. They're going to arrange for you to see the best specialists. We'll make sure that the right treatment is in place to help your leg." Jamie's heart skipped a beat. He had imagined this moment countless times, imagined someone hearing his plea, imagining someone taking action. But now that it was actually happening, it felt unreal. "You're really going to help me?" Jamie asked, his voice shaky with disbelief. Brian's eyes softened, and he nodded. "I'm not just going to help you, Jamie. We're going to make sure you get the care you need, no matter what it takes. And I want you to know that you don't need to worry about the cost. That's all taken care of. Your recovery, your treatment, your future, we've got it covered." The words hit Jamie like a wave, overwhelming him. He didn't know how to process the flood of emotions rushing through him: relief, joy, disbelief. For so long, he had fought alone, trying to manage the pain, to hold on to hope even when it seemed hopeless. And now, here he was, in the CEO's office, with someone telling him that his struggle was finally going to end. A small tear slipped down Jamie's cheek, and he quickly wiped it away, embarrassed by the outpouring of emotion. But Brian noticed, his gaze filled with understanding. "It's okay to cry, Jamie," Brian said softly. "You've carried a lot of pain, and now it's time to let it go. It's time to heal." Jamie nodded slowly, unable to speak. The lump in his throat was too large, and the emotion was too overwhelming. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something brighter than the endless days of pain and struggle. A glimmer of hope. As Brian made a few more calls to finalize Jamie's treatment plan, Jamie sat back in the chair, absorbing everything that was happening. He had never imagined that this would be his reality. He had never imagined that someone like Brian Thompson, someone with the power to change things, would care enough to fight for him. Brian returned to his seat and looked at Jamie with a gentle smile. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I need you to know that this is just the beginning. You're going to get the care you deserve, and more importantly, you're going to have the chance to live the life you deserve. A life without pain, a life where you don't have to worry about your leg holding you back." Jamie looked down at his leg, the one that had caused him so much pain for so long. For the first time, he didn't feel anger or fear when he looked at it. He didn't feel resentment. Instead, there was a quiet hope building inside him, a belief that somehow things were going to get better. This really means everything to me," Jamie whispered, his voice cracking. "I never thought anyone would care enough to help me. I thought it was always going to be like this." Brian's expression softened even more, his eyes filled with compassion. "I know, and that's why we're here now, to make sure you never have to feel like that again. We're going to walk this journey with you, Jamie. You're not alone anymore." Jamie wiped his face again, trying to gather himself. The storm of emotions inside him was almost too much to handle. But the comfort of Brian's words, the certainty in his voice, gave Jamie a strength he didn't know he had. "I don't know how to thank you," Jamie said quietly. "You don't have to thank me," Brian replied. "Just focus on getting better. That's all you need to do." With those words, something shifted in Jamie. For the first time, he felt like the future wasn't an impossible dream. It was a real, tangible thing. And it wasn't just about his leg. It was about everything. His chance to go to school without being held back, to run and play with the other kids, to live without the constant shadow of pain. As Brian arranged the final details of Jamie's treatment, Jamie felt a warmth spread through him, like the weight of years of suffering was being lifted, bit by bit. And as the door opened and the medical team arrived, ready to work with Jamie, he took one last look at Brian. His heart was full, and he could finally believe that, no matter what happened next, he had been given a second chance. The days that followed felt like a dream for Jamie. Everything moved so quickly, faster than he could have ever imagined. The pain that had once been his constant companion now seemed distant, like a shadow he was slowly learning to forget. The treatment started almost immediately. Jamie was seen by the top specialists Brian had promised, and the care he received was unlike anything he had ever known. Each doctor, each nurse, treated him with such kindness and respect, and there was no talk of bills or payments, no more rejections or closed doors. Every visit was a reminder that somehow he was worthy of this care, worthy of a future that wasn't limited by his pain. One day, a few weeks after his initial visit to HealthCare, Jamie found himself sitting in a physical therapy room. His leg had been repaired, and he had undergone multiple sessions to strengthen it. The muscles were slowly returning to normal, and the sensation of walking without pain was becoming more real with every step. Jamie stood, facing the mirror, his legs slightly trembling. The new prosthetic they had fitted him with felt like an extension of himself, like something that had always been a part of him, but he had never known how to reach it. He balanced himself with a walker, but he could already see the possibility of walking on his own, of running, of living without limitations. Brian had been there, visiting him several times in the weeks since, checking on his progress and making sure everything was going smoothly. He'd also introduced Jamie to a few of the engineers at HealthCare, who had worked on the design of the prosthetics, explaining how the technology behind them was not only cutting edge, but also designed with Jamie's specific needs in mind. And for the first time in his life, Jamie felt like he was in control of his future. But it wasn't just the physical changes that made Jamie's heart swell with gratitude. It was the emotional transformation. He had begun to believe in himself again. He had hope, something he thought he had lost forever. One afternoon, Jamie sat with Brian in his office, the same office where they had first met. The CEO had just checked in on Jamie's progress, making sure everything was on track. "How's it feeling, Jamie?" Brian asked, sitting across from him. Jamie smiled a little shyly, but the joy in his eyes was unmistakable. "It's amazing. I can walk now. I never thought I'd be able to say that." Brian's face lit up with pride. "You've come a long way. You've worked hard, and you've earned every step." "I still can't believe this is real," Jamie admitted, his voice quiet but filled with emotion. You really saved my life. You didn't just fix my leg. You gave me my life back." Brian shook his head slightly, his expression soft and sincere. "You did that, Jamie. You were the one who never gave up. I just made sure you got the help you needed. You did the hard work." Jamie's eyes welled with tears, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. The journey he had gone on was nothing short of a miracle, one that he had never thought possible. And now, here he was, standing, walking, and looking forward to a future that was no longer defined by his disability. "I'll never be able to thank you enough," Jamie said, his voice breaking. "You don't have to thank me," Brian replied with a warm smile. "Just live your life. That's the best thank you you could give." As Jamie left the office that day, he walked out with his head held higher, his future no longer clouded by pain or uncertainty. The road ahead was still long, but it was a road that he could now travel with confidence. He could finally chase the dreams that had always seemed so far away. He could run. He could play soccer. He could be like every other kid. But most importantly, he could live without fear of his disability holding him back. And as he walked down the hallway, he knew that this wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning.